hybridized.
Happy?
Yeah, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming to my talk about my bachelor project titled Evolving Threats, a hybridized malware analysis of ransomware behavior. So you've already done my introduction for me, but yeah, I'm a former electrician. I've always had an interest for IT, so I decided to study digital forensics here at Norway University College. And during my studies, I've worked at NetSecurity, where I've been lucky enough to continue after my studies. So through both my coursework and hands-on experience, I've developed strong interest in malware analysis, which became the focus of my thesis, specifically looking at ransomware behavior. So just a little background on ransomware evolution. Ransomware has quickly become one of the most destructive and costly forms of cyber attacks. While it accounts for only about 10% of global cyber incidents, it makes up nearly half of all incident response cases, a clear sign of its disproportionate impact. Ransomware is no longer just a simple file encrypting malware. It has evolved into a professionalized criminal ecosystem, with today's attacks being more organized, aggressive, and strategically executed. Models like ransomware as a service allow low-skilled actors to launch attacks by using ready-made ransomware provided by developers in exchange for a share of the profits. Tactics like double extortion increase the pressure on victims by threatening to leak stolen data, in addition to encrypting it. At the same time, attackers are shifting toward bigger targets with bigger payoffs, a tactic known as big game hunting. Going after big high-value targets like hospitals or large companies that are more likely to pay up quickly to avoid major disruptions. So while the number of ransomware attacks may be declining, the damage per incident is climbing fast. So it's no surprise that global damages are projected to hit $57 billion in 2025, despite ransomware accounting for just a small slice of the total cyber incidents. Yet a lot of teams still rely on traditional malware analysis using static or dynamic methods on their own. But the truth is, ransomware often affects multiple aspects of the system, including the file system, memory, and network communications. So relying on isolated detection techniques can miss the bigger picture. To address this gap, my project adopted a hybridized malware analysis framework, combining static, dynamic, network, and forensic analysis. The goal was to get a more realistic picture of how ransomware behaves in real-world attacks and how we can improve detection, analysis, and response. The process starts with static analysis, examining the malware without actually running it. This helps reveal key characteristics like file fingerprints, embedded strings, imported functions, and signs of obfuscation. These insights are useful not only for early detection and signature creation, but also inferring the malware's possible behavior before it executes. Next comes dynamic analysis, where we actually run the sample in a controlled environment. This lets us see how it behaves in real time, from process creation and memory activity to evasion techniques designed to avoid detection. Then we move into network analysis, watching the traffic for signs of command and control activity or data exfiltration, which is especially important with the rise of double extortion. Finally, we conduct forensic analysis, examining the system post-infection to uncover evidence of malicious activity, such as unauthorized changes to the file system or registry, deployment of persistence mechanisms, or the presence of malware artifacts left behind. Taken together, these techniques give us a holistic view of malware, from how it's built to how it behaves, communicates, and leaves its mark, helping us understand both its immediate impact and its longer-term goals. That comprehensive understanding is what shaped the research goals for my project. So using this framework, my research focused on analyzing samples from 2 ransomware families targeting Windows operating systems, structured around 4 sub-objectives. Use static analysis to identify what the malware is capable of and how it may try to avoid detection. Watch how it behaves in real time by running it in a controlled environment. Dig into the forensic and network evidence to understand the system impact and any communication with the outside. And finally, map all the findings to the MITRE ATT&CK framework to provide a structured overview of the tactics and techniques used by the samples. Together, These objectives aimed at giving a deeper understanding of how ransomware behaves, going beyond just surface level indicators. But there was one key limitation to my project. The analysis relied entirely on free online tools and sandbox environments, rather than local virtual machines or bare metal setups. That's important because some ransomware are designed to detect and evade sandbox and virtualized environments, meaning certain behaviors may not appear unless the system conditions closely mimic that of a real endpoint. With that in mind, the next step was to design a methodology that could support this kind of layered multi-technique analysis. So building my methodology, the goal was to extract as much insight as possible from the ransomware samples, as said, using only free available online tools and sandboxes, while staying aligned with the hybridized analysis framework. So it started with sample acquisition, followed by a quick triage using VirusTotal and Manalizer to check the sample's integrity and authenticity. After that, I ran a static analysis of each sample before executing them across multiple online sandboxes. That gave me the basis for conducting dynamic, forensic, and network analysis. Finally, all the findings were correlated and mapped to the Mitre attack framework to build a structured picture of each ransomware sample's attack lifecycle. While VirusTotal and VirusTotal was mostly used for static analysis, it does offer some dynamic insights, just like some of the sandboxes included static details. These overlaps were helpful for cross-checking results between each step. So despite the whole process relying on online tools, it still allowed for a layered and well-rounded behavioral analysis. So my research focused on samples from two active families, Medusa and ransomware. These were chosen based on their recent activity in Norway, tracked through sources like ransomware.live, and because of their contrasting approaches. Medusa is known for aggressive and often destructive behavior, while ransomware tends to focus on stealth and persistence. That contrast made them ideal for a comparative analysis. So to the findings, and to make sense of the static analysis findings, I've broken them into categories, starting with file metadata and structure. At its core, we're looking at a 32-bit PE file but several sections show medium entropy levels, which are suggestive of obfuscation or packing due to increased data randomness. Interestingly, it also includes a PDV path, likely left over from the developer's build environment. File hashing and fingerprinting also verified the sample's integrity and authenticity. Medusa makes use of several APIs from the kernel 32 library, which handles core system functions. Some of these functions are attributed to anti-analysis and evasion. Medusa is uses well-known techniques like debugger detection and dynamic import resolution to conceal its true behavior from static analysis. It also uses system profiling APIs to collect hardware and environment details, likely to customize its execution or avoid sandboxes and virtual machines. It imports functions related to multi-threading, heap management, and memory protection changes, all of which may support unpacking or runtime injection into memory. This also imports functions that enable it to read and write files, scan available drives, and modify file attributes. Behaviors that, while very common, are essential for locating and encrypting target data. Finally, it imports cryptographic APIs to support a hybrid encryption scheme, which aligns with its known ransomware functionality. Altogether, these features point at a ransomware payload that's not just capable and evasive, but also designed to potentially complicate static analysis and reverse engineering. Static analysis of RansomHub reveals an equally capable, though more stealth-oriented ransomware strain. Structurally, it's a 32-bit PE file, like Medusa, but with a few red flags. It includes an unusual .symtab section and showed medium entropy levels, both suggestive of packing or obfuscation. Its compile timestamp is set to the Unix epoch default, suggestive of deliberate tampering. Interestingly, the PE header contains non-zero symbol table pointer, even though no symbols remain. This might be left over from packing or a deliberate attempt to mislead analysts or disrupt forensic tools. Like Medusa, ransomware makes extensive use of functions from the kernel 32 library. Where it stands out is in its evasion logic. It uses functions like close handle and vectored exception handlers, common techniques that intercept exceptions and can disrupt or confuse debuggers. It also resolves APIs at runtime and profiles the system, for example, checking CPU affinity or modifying error handling attempts. Behaviors often linked to sandbox evasion and anti-analysis. Additionally, it introduces possible execution delays using set waitable timer to outlast automated sandboxes before executing. It adjusts its process priority and mimics system resources through handle duplication. These behaviors likely support stealth and help avoid automated analysis environments. From a control perspective, it supports thread creation, context manipulation, and dynamic memory allocation, techniques often used for code injection, in-memory staging, or evading detection by avoiding the file system. Like Medusa, ransomware can read, write, and close files, and it calls system-level functions to gather environment details. Again, very common but essential behaviors for locating and encrypting data. Overall, ransomware appears to be designed with stealth in mind, focusing more on evasion, anti-analysis, and controlled execution. Due to time constraints for this presentation, the dynamic network and forensic results have been consolidated into a single overview based on sandbox findings. It begins with low bin abuse, with the malware leveraging built-in Windows tools like net to disable security services, then escalated to using taskkill with debug privileges to terminate processes and delete shadow copies using VSSadmin. Medusa also seemingly attempted to tamper with native security infrastructure, interacting with Windows Defender drives, driver components, and monitoring related registry keys, likely to aid in detecting or evading built-in security tools. On the anti-analysis front, it performed environment checks via PowerShell, likely probing for sandbox indicators using Windows APIs. It also queried the system locale using getLocaleInfo, likely to exclude systems from the CIS region, which is consistent with known behavior. Finally, after execution, it issued a self-deletion command, possibly to clean up after itself. So based on related work, I was expecting some form of network activity related to command and control or data exfiltration, but yeah, there wasn't any. Medusa is known to use remote access tools for command and control, so it's likely performed through hands-on keyboard operation, or the sample simply failed to engage due to sandbox detection, inactive infrastructure, or missing configuration. Still, despite its anti-analysis efforts, the sample dynamically resolved crypt export key, encrypted files with a .medusa extension, and dropped its ransom note across multiple directories on the system. Interestingly, the ransom note claimed that data had been stolen as well as encrypted, even though there was no network activity to support that claim. It is likely just leveraging its reputation for double extortion to pressure the victim whether or not any of that data was actually exfiltrated. Moving on to the ransomware sample, its sandbox behavior was noticeably different from Medusa. The first thing that stood out was the memory allocation and payload staging. Upon execution, the sample allocated a large 500 megabyte block of memory with both read and write permissions. That kind of allocation typically suggests unpacking or in-memory payload staging, commonly used to avoid leaving traces on the file system. Alongside that, ransomware used anti-analysis techniques. It suppressed error messages using system flags, likely to avoid pop-ups or crash dialogues that might alert the user. It called APIs commonly used to probe its execution environment and queried the registry for code identifiers and network configuration. It also checked locale and language settings, supporting earlier claims that ransomware, like Medusa, avoids systems in the CIS region, in addition to specific countries like China, North Korea, and Cuba. But here's where things got interesting. After this profiling stage, the process terminated itself using exit process, so there was no encryption, no ransom note, and no clear payload activity. One of the sandboxes even assigned it a benign rating of 3 out of 10, but this being a known ransomware sample, I of course knew this was the case. So I started digging into older sandbox submissions. And luckily, one of them saw the sample launch several Chrome processes using the adjust token privileges API, probably to escalate privileges or prepare for process injection. These processes reached out to a pastebin URL, and interestingly, that same URL later showed up in traffic to several ad tech domains. This behavior suggests it might have been hiding malicious traffic inside what looked like normal browser activity. This traffic could have been used to deliver additional payload, pull down configuration settings, or just check in on the infected system while blending in with everyday web activity. Altogether, it points to a staged browser-based execution model, which as far as I've seen hasn't been covered in other write-ups. Still, there was no sign of encryption or file system changes in the sandboxes, likely due to sandbox evasion, unsatisfied execution triggers, or inactive network infrastructure. The last of my research goal was to map observed behaviors to the MITRE attack framework to understand how Medusa and Ransom Hub operate across the full attack lifecycle. These mappings combine what I could observe in sandbox environments with data from prior research and threat intelligence. That was necessary because neither sample executed fully, likely due to anti-analysis features designed to evade automated tools. So I had to take a hybrid approach, combining what I could directly observe with known behaviors from real-world reporting. These mappings formed the foundation for incident response playbooks, which served as the artifacts of my project. The playbooks were developed to guide offenders and responders through detecting, containing, eradicating, and recovering from such infections. So here's a close-up visual representation of the Medusa mapping. Tactics are shown in purple, followed by techniques in yellow and sub-techniques in orange, detailing how each stage of the attack is carried out, from general methods down to specific behaviors. The flow follows the typical attack lifecycle, moving from initial access through execution, persistence, privilege escalation, and defense evasion, then onto discovery, lateral movement, exfiltration, command and control, and impact. Developing the MITRE attack mappings and the incident response playbooks made one thing clear. The hybridized analysis approach can offer a much more complete view of how ransomware behaves, but in this case, it was limited by the use of online malware analysis sandboxes, which couldn't capture more advanced or evasive behaviors. Tools like online malware analysis sandboxes are a great starting point, especially for quick triage, since they require minimal setup. But their limitations become obvious when dealing with heavily evasive malware, designed to evade analysis environments or wait for real user interaction. That's why deeper analysis using local virtual machines or bare metal systems or telemetry from real incidents is so important. It provides the kind of behavioral insight that sandboxes alone just can't deliver. This highlights the need to bridge the gap between controlled research environments and real-world data. Only then can we fully understand and defend against today's more sophisticated ransomware attacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And he gets the digital necromancer. Very nice. Thank